Good evening. My name is David Greenwald. I'm the director of the Davis Vanguard, and this is our pilot edition of Court Watch TV, where we'll be talking each week with several interns in our Court Watch program. They're assigned to monitor cases and report on what they see. And today we have Adrian Lopez to my right, and Carly Gunn and Kelsey Stewart. So welcome to our program. So Adrian, can you tell us a little bit about what the Court Watch internship entails?
Yeah, so I go to court and I watch interesting trials, interesting motions, usually motions that have to do with evidence or constitutional issues, and just kind of report on what I see in the public sphere and tell the public what's going on in the Yolo County Superior Court.
And can you tell us a bit about what you've learned in your time?
Yeah, I would say what I've learned in my time is really what our legal process looks like, and it's a process that I don't think a lot of the public has seen or knows about, and so it's been really eye-opening to kind of see just what happens behind the doors of a courtroom and what's going on and the laws that influence the lives of so many people, and it's been really eye-opening. Kind of lets you see a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life and how they're involved in the legal process.
And how long have you been doing this?
So this is my second quarter here, so I guess about 4 or 5 months collectively, and we still got a couple more months to go, so I've been here for a little bit.
Okay. So Carly, how long have you been an intern?
So this is actually just my first quarter here, so I've only been here for about 5 weeks, but I really value this internship just because it allows you to learn legal terminology in an actual and real life setting, and I think it's important to understand how our law is, because oftentimes it's portrayed and depicted in media that isn't always honest of how it is. And yeah, I think this internship is a great eye-opener and door into seeing what the legal system looks like, and if I would want to have a potential career in it somewhere.
And Kelsey, how long have you been an intern?
This is my first quarter as well.
And what have you learned?
I think this internship has already boosted my writing quite a bit. I have a lot of experience of creative writing, but objective writing has never been my strong point, and I think it's really nice to flex those muscles and learn how to tell a story, but a real story, and make sure to keep it as accurate, but also keep it very compelling for the reader as well.
So has that been a challenging experience?
It has been challenging, yes. Definitely with keeping notes in court and making sure that I have everything perfect information-wise, but also weaving a narrative that is accurate, but is also telling a story.
What about you? How has writing been for you?
So before this, I was in a student organization called the Cycle News Hour. And so for that, there's kind of 5 divisions, and I was in U.S. and politics, in which I would have to go online and do some research and then do journalism broadcasting. So writing and reporting objectively wasn't probably my biggest challenge, but I think what I struggle the most with is probably over note-taking and starting to be a little redundant in my notes. But no, I really enjoy writing for this, just because, like Kelsey said, you can make it kind of more creative and also compelling, but still keep it unbiased and objective for the reader.
So this is your second quarter. How has the writing been the second time around?
I've never had too much of an issue with writing objectively just because of my political science education, and so considering both sides of a story and sides that I might not agree with or sides that I might want to evaluate more closely, it's never been an issue for me, and I think the second time in this internship it's even pushed those skills even more about making sure you're considering all the facts, not leaving any details out, and writing objectively. I think it's been a great experience, and it's nice to have learned little by little in the second time I've been here.
And so why don't we start with Kelsey? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and stuff?
Sure. So oddly enough, I'm not a political science nor an English major. I'm a classics major, which is basically everything about ancient Greek and ancient Roman civilization. And I wanted to join this internship because I love writing so much, and I wanted to grow a lot as a writer, and I also have a really deep interest in law that I haven't really explored with my major, and I was considering as a career, and I wanted to know more about it, so I wanted to become a more informed citizen and learn about what was going on in the courtroom, and also flex my muscles as a writer. Sorry to use that again. Keeps coming
And you?
Yeah, so I'm a political science public service major with a minor in human rights, and then I'm kind of considering maybe adding a minor in Middle Eastern studies. And so this internship's great because it kind of allows me to explore if I do want to pursue a career in maybe being a lawyer. I'm pretty sure that is what I'm going to do, but whether I do want to pursue criminal justice or something else. As of now, I'm not sure if I want to be criminal justice, but I think that's why this internship is, valuable, because I can learn if I do or do not want to pursue something, and it's nice to be able to give back to the community in the sense of honesty and, I don't know, just telling them what's really going on in the county.
One of the interesting things I've had over the years, we've been doing this since 2010, so this is actually our 10th year of the Court Watch program. I've had students now who have gone through, some have become public defenders, some have become professors. I've had students finish the Court Watch program and go, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I have one student say, you know what I learned? I learned I don't want to go to law school.
That's just as important, though.
Yeah, exactly, because you end up spending $150,000 and being in debt, and you don't want to do it. It's really valuable to figure out what you don't want to do. Of course, you only really get a sense for the criminal side, so you don't get a sense for the full lawyer experience. But I guess they got enough of a sense to realize they didn't want to do it. I forget what the question was, but tell us about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a political science public service major. I'm actually graduating this quarter, so this will be my last quarter at UC Davis as an undergrad. And I actually always kind of wanted to be an attorney. I was in mock trial in high school, and I was a defense attorney, and playing the defense side of things. I started to research public defense more, public defenders, and that's my dream. I'd like to be a public defender, and I've applied to law school. I'm still waiting to hear back on some, so we'll see if the whole law school dream works out. But yeah.
Where have you heard from?
So I applied to UC Hastings, King Hall here at UC Davis, McGeorge, and I'm still waiting. I only heard back from McGeorge so far, so I'm actually still waiting on the others. But I'm hoping for the best. Thank you.
So how has this internship helped you then in your goals?
Well, honestly, it's really opened my eyes to what this job entails, both what, for example, the media portrays it as, either accurately or inaccurately, and also really the slow and kind of niche parts of being a lawyer that you don't see. The dealings and the negotiations and the waiting and even arguing motions and fighting on behalf of your client in court. It's a part of being a lawyer that I don't think most people really see. Even people who want to be attorneys, they actually don't know what it looks like. And so that's what I've learned from this internship is seeing what it is like to be an attorney, both the boring parts and the interesting parts, I guess, if you will.
How about for you?
No, I definitely agree with that. I think a big dilemma that people face is they're used to this Hollywood depiction of court being this very intense, passionate, driven scene where it's just really not. It's it's a very respectful, civil situation, and kind of in addition to what Adrian was saying, I think it's really valuable to understand what goes beyond or what's going on behind court and seeing kind of what's the day-to-day life of these lawyers and what they're actually doing, because court is only such a little tiny bit of it, and there are some boring pieces of it, and so, but I think I like the boring, so I think I still want to be an attorney, but I'm interested in civil also, civil law.
What do you think, Kelsey?
What was the question?
How this internship has helped you with your career goals?
Yeah, I've definitely learned a lot that I did not expect to learn. I learned that it's a lot of waiting, honestly. Hurry up and wait, kind of. And I learned that it is a very intricate process. There is so much to learn, nothing more than you can see on TV, definitely. A lot of legal jargon I've picked up that I'm excited to show off. And it is definitely still a career goal for me that I'm exploring.
Yeah, one of the things that I tell interns when they come into the program is stop watching the TV court dramas because it's nothing like the real life stuff. I forget what movie I was watching, but it was supposedly one of the good court movies. And I'm watching and I'm like, you can't do that.
Doesn't work like
That'd be
that.
an objection. You have all these real animated questions that would get objected to immediately because they're compound questions and leading questions, and it doesn't work like that. It's it's one question at a time, very slowly. You tease the information out. It's almost like watching paint dry sometimes. It's like, get to the point.
It's tedious.
It is. There's a tedium there. I think it'd be more interesting if you're the actual attorney than that. But it was interesting. I got a chance a few years ago to be a witness by accident. I had interviewed a family prior to the trial, and the district attorney decided it was a good idea to subpoena me. So I get home on Sunday at like 6 o'clock, and there's a subpoena sitting on my door. It's like taped to my door. And I'm like, what do I do? Oh, call Josh. Josh is a friend of mine, Josh Kaizuka, who's an attorney. And I said, hey, Josh, I got the subpoena. Can you come to court tomorrow and help me quash it? So he comes to court. It ends up being this 3-day ordeal. He's like, I am never answering the phone at 6:30 on a Sunday again if it says your name. But we didn't quash it, but we got it to the point where my testimony was 5 minutes of uselessness. So basically I authenticated the fact that what was written in the story I wrote, and they told me. Okay. I hope that helped you. And the defendants got acquitted, which they should have. So that was also good. All right. So let's see. Well, let's start with Adrian on this one since he's been around a little longer. So can you talk about a memorable case or cases that you've seen?
I would say the case that stuck with me most is a case from my previous quarter here, actually in spring of 2018. I saw a case called People v. Magoya, which was a gentleman. He was a Latino man, and he was accused of killing his wife's lover. And I watched pretty much all of that from kind of start to finish. The opening statements from the attorneys. There were a lot of witnesses. The victim was, obviously the victim wasn't there, but the wife was there. And I saw her testimony. It was very emotional. That was absolutely probably the most emotional trial I probably ever sat through. I think it was about a week or two in duration. And it's hard to kind of look at that guy and the guy who was the defendant. He was actually convicted. But, when you evaluate everything, you kind of do wonder sometimes, like, wow, I'm not sure if he is guilty of what he's being charged with. And you really have to evaluate the testimony and the facts, and it was hard sometimes to do that. You feel for the defendant sometimes, you feel for the victim sometimes, you feel for the witnesses sometimes, and it can be an experience. And so that's the case that stuck with me the most.
What about you?
I think the case that probably stuck with me the most was about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. It was People versus Gerald Elledge, and he. I think this was just the most memorable case to me because it really proved that not everything goes as planned in court, and defense attorneys and prosecutors can really have their case just taken right out from under them. So what happened was they had the main victim in court, and it dealt with a robbery, and so the man that she had stated broke into her house, and she was shown pictures and everything, and said, yes, this is him, was the man that was in court. But when they asked her, is the man that broke into your house in court, and she said no, that was like a big shock to everyone because the pictures matched the man that was sitting there, but she wasn't able to identify him for whatever reason. And so the prosecution, I guarantee, was not happy about that. But so I think that just shows that things just don't always go as planned, and you really have to prepare for everything and be on your toes.
Kelsey?
I was gonna second the Elledge case. That was the second. No, that was the first. That was the first trial I sat in on, and I thought it was really interesting because it hit very close to home, literally for me, because that is my apartment complex that they were discussing, and my one I'm moving into next year with the second apartment complex involved. So I kind of realized that you kind of separate yourself sometimes from what is going on in court if you don't ever go to court, and you feel like you're living a separate life, but actually, the court is dealing with real human issues, and it's the community we live in. So it kind of was a shock to me to realize that I have ties to the courthouse, even if I don't know I do. And I also thought it was very surprising that the defense, in their closing statement, they asked the man to remove his shirt in court, and that was just a weird moment for everybody. The jury was kind of laughing, and so it was just kind of like a reminder that funny things can happen in a courtroom, shocking things happen all the time, and it does not go as planned.
Very interesting. So I'll tell my story. There's probably 10 or 15 of these I could tell, but the one that's standing out is Ornelas Castro. So it was closing arguments. I was there by complete happenstance. I forget why I was there actually, but they announced that they were going to do the closing, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll watch this. Closing are like the easiest things if you're just jumping in the middle of a trial to actually just write on, because you get, kind of the synopsis of the trial. So the story of Ornelas Castro is that he and this other friend who had turned state's evidence had admitted to shooting and killing a third guy who was a marijuana drug dealer. And basically this guy had PTSD. They had arranged to buy a quantity of marijuana. This was a few years ago when marijuana was still illegal. And they're like arguing over the price. And so eventually what happens is the victim had like this twitch or this sudden movement, and the guy in the backseat basically shot and killed him. And so they admitted to having shot and killed him. And the prosecution, instead of charging it as either second-degree murder or what I thought it should have been was voluntary manslaughter, decided that they were trying to rob him, and that he was therefore guilty through the felony murder rule, which no longer applies, of first-degree murder. And the other guy had pled out and taken, I think, a 16-year sentence. So the prosecutor, I can't think of her last name, a female prosecutor, lays out this argument. She's got all these text messages and argues that these text messages show that they had intended to rob this guy, and therefore it's attempted murder. Dan Hutchinson is the public defender, and he gives what I believe to be, in my 10 years of watching this, the single best closing argument I've ever seen. And so he goes through all the text messages. He shows that none of them actually refer to robbery, let alone this actual event. And so he makes it seem completely irrelevant to the case. He argues that the guy has PTSD, and that when he saw the guy twitching, he thought that the guy was had a gun because he was a drug dealer, and therefore it was self-defense. So they end up coming back. The jury had already acquitted him of the robbery, so the first degree was off the table. And then basically it came down to whether or not it was voluntary manslaughter or self-defense. And again, I'm thinking this should be voluntary manslaughter. It's not self-defense. They're kind of arguing that it's imperfect self-defense, that they thought it was reasonable that he might have a weapon, and therefore he was justified in firing the weapon. He makes the argument, the jury comes back, they acquit him. No business getting this guy off. I mean, this is a guy who admitted to shooting and killing this guy in what was not what you would consider legally justifiable self-defense. And Dan Hutchinson just out-argued, it was Ayala. She lost like a couple in a row too, so I'm sure it wasn't a good period for her. But yeah, that was like the best lawyering I've ever seen. I mean, there are other cases that stick out over the years that we've seen, but that's kind of the big one. All right, so why don't we go around, start with Kelsey, kind of some closing thoughts after you've heard this discussion that you want to leave the viewers with.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. So this is on my my 5th week with the internship, but I feel like I've learned so much about the legal system, so much about what goes on behind the closed doors, and I'm really excited to learn more and share more of what I learned.
So I think, for me, I think what's exciting and enjoyable about this internship, aside from the work itself, is the professionalism that comes with it, and being able to dress nicely and go to court and take yourself seriously, because you don't really have the opportunity in a lot of other situations. And so I've enjoyed that aspect of it. But I think just understanding our law and how it's put into action, and how it does affect people on the individual level, I think has been really important to me, and for me to see that. And I've enjoyed writing as well. I love writing, so it's also just been a great outlet for that. And I think reviewing past cases that we've kind of been working on has also been really great.
Adrian?
I would say for me, the closing thoughts that I have is kind of agreeing with Carly in that this internship really brings the law, this kind of obscure, sort of far away concept that we think of as the law, and it's really allowed me as a person, and I hope other people as well, to say, the law and people, our communities, our families, they're not so far away from each other as we might think, and I think the public needs to learn more about what goes on in the courts. I think the public needs to learn more about what goes on in our criminal justice system, the laws that our legislature makes, there in Sacramento. I think the public needs to know more about that, and this internship has been invaluable in kind of opening my eyes to what's going on behind those doors. And I encourage anybody else to absolutely get involved out in the courts or in this internship. Mm-hmm. If you're taking any more interns, David.
Yeah.
Always are.
It's something unique. It really is. It's a beautiful thing.
So, kind of a few closing thoughts by me. I mean, first of all, one of the unique factors of this internship is this is really one of the few opportunities that undergraduate students that are thinking about going to law school, or they want to have a career in law or in writing, can actually get into the court in a structured way and see what's going on in the court system. And that's been an interesting side benefit from why we created the Court Watch in the first place. And I think, from a student perspective, they're really going through an interesting period of time where, most students, when they enter college, if they've ever had a job, it's fast food, or they're like, waitressing or babysitting. And this is really, a first time that they get to use their brain and the education that they have and their experience and start putting it together. And they come out of this knowing a lot about the court system. As I said earlier, they learn whether or not they want to go to law school. But they also know, if they are going into law school, what an actual lawyer does, what happens in the courtroom, what the law looks like. And then from the public's perspective, most members of the public don't get to see what's happening. Unless they're a juror or unless they get caught in the legal system itself, they may have no idea what's going on. And I considered myself very educated, and yet when I first started going to the courtroom, I was stunned. There were just things that just blew me away. 378-year sentence was one of them. Ajay Dev. And some of the things that happen and that you end up seeing, you're not expecting. So thank you guys for joining me. This is the first episode of Court Watch TV. I'm David Greenwald, the director of the Davis Vanguard. You can log on to davisvanguard.org every day to learn the latest of what's happening in Yolo County Courts. Thanks.